Welcome to the On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast, your one-stop shop for obesity medicine news with your host, man on the pen, Dave Knapp. Welcome to this Tuesday, June 24th edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. It's what we talk about each and every week here as we bring you obesity medicine news from the patient perspective so that you can have more competent and confident conversations with your medical providing team. If that sounds like something you believe in, you got to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, give it a 5-star rating review on the podcast. But we got a ton to get into. This past weekend was, of course, the ADA 85th Annual Scientific Sessions, and On the Pen covered it wall to wall over on our Substack. So if you're not on our Substack, listen, all of our coverage of ADA was completely free, not behind the paywall. So you can simply go to obesity.news. Type that into your browser, obesity.news, enter. And that's going to take you to our Substack where you can just put your email address in. It'll just deliver all the news that's pertinent to you directly to your inbox. But there was a ton to get to, and we're going to try to unpack it all today, as well as some other news that's broken in the last 24, 48 hours. There's just so much to get to. But starting with Maritide. Maritide is a very interesting molecule that people have been interested in for the last a couple of years now, and we got some data on Maritide. Now, for those of you who don't know, Maritide is an interesting concept. So it's a once monthly injection. So where everything we have currently is once weekly, you'd only take this one time a month. But is that a good thing based upon the data that we know about Maritide? Probably not. So we're going to jump into it. Maritide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist, like everything else, but it's also a GIP blocker. So Tirzepatide, Manjaro, Zepbound, they actually activate the GIP receptors. Maritide does the opposite. It blocks them. Go figure that they can get a similar result from a weight loss perspective by blocking it or by stimulating that receptor. Either way, tinkering with the GIP seems to be helpful in weight management. So Maritide took the opposite track of Lilly. Lilly continues to claim that by activating the GIP receptors, it actually mellows out the side effects that you would otherwise feel with a straight GLP-1. That's why people who get on to Zepbound or Manjaro and were previously on Wegovy or Ozempic talk about how much less side effect, the nausea and GI side effects that they experience with Zepbound or Manjaro. This takes a totally opposite track by blocking those receptors. Now, the good news about Maritide is at the high doses, patients did lose quite a reasonable amount of weight, about 20% for people without diabetes and 17% for people with type 2 diabetes. And so it's up there, right, with other treatments that we've seen in phase 2 clinical trials. But this is where it gets interesting. So the titration process in this phase 2 study saw some wings of the trial basically not really titrate, go up to these high doses of Maritide. And in some of those arms of the study, data showed vomiting rates as close to 90%. So just think about that. 90% of the people who were slammed with this high dose to get, again, that 17 and 20% body weight, they had 90% vomiting rate. So, I mean, I can think of a lot of things that can help people lose weight if they're just constantly vomiting. So that's the negative side of Maritide, which they're going to have to fix in their phase 3 trials, which I think will bring the weight loss down to earth as well. And so this is not one I've been super excited about, just because this has been the ongoing problem with Maritide, is that, I mean, people are willing to put up with a lot in terms of being physically fit and getting the weight off and getting healthier. People are willing to put up with a lot, but I'm not sure that people are willing to put up with being sick constantly. Now, again, that was The higher percent of the vomiting were people that did not hit the titration, just went to those upper doses. But still, even without titrating, you had 65 to 85% of patients reporting vomiting, which is still very, very high. So that's Maritide. People were really eager about the information from Maritide, and the Maritide data was kind of right on track with what we expected to see based upon what we saw in phase 1. And so they didn't really fix their titration issues. Of course, they'll do that for phase 3, but I think that people have to expect that the weight loss part of it is going to come back down to earth with Maritide. Now, Maritide, another thing, besides being a once monthly injection, which you're stuck with these side effects for a long time with a once monthly injection. But I think what does get people excited about Maritide, and rightfully so, is that it's a third company. It's Amgen. So we're not talking about Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk here. We're talking about another pharmaceutical giant in Amgen. And so it is positive to see other companies getting into the fray with medications that do appear to be pretty effective. We would love to see more market pressure on Lilly and Novo to bring down the costs of their medication. So that is the positive thing. Now, not to be outdone, we've got a really interesting trial from Eli Lilly on Wegovy. Now, you're hearing me right, and I got a lot of messages back on my Substack about this. That, didn't you mean to say Novo Nordisk's Wegovy trial? No, I didn't. Because here's what happened. And we covered this actually 2 years ago at my camper in July. 2 years ago, we covered the fact that Eli Lilly acquired a company with an asset called bimagrumab. Now, bimagrumab is a really interesting molecule. It's a myostatin inhibitor, meaning it helps to preserve and possibly build muscle mass while helping to shed fat. And so this is super interesting because Eli Lilly acquired this molecule back in 2023 when the company that owned the molecule had already started testing it with semaglutide. So for that reason, Eli Lilly kept with that trial, knowing that eventually, even though Versanis Bio, the company that owned bimagrumab when the trial started with semaglutide, that they would eventually be able to switch in the next phase of trials to tirzepatide or retatrutide or whatever Eli Lilly chose. So in this study, bimagrumab, which is now owned by Eli Lilly, was paired with Wegovy. Now listen, in the Wegovy trials for obesity, patients lost just under 16% of their body weight in a 68-week trial. Now listen to what happened for patients that combined Wegovy and bimagrumab in a much shorter trial. So this trial was 48 weeks long compared to that 68-week Wegovy trial. And in much less time, patients pairing semaglutide with bimagrumab lost 22% of their body weight. So the weight loss ticked way up in combination with bimagrumab, but that's not even the headline. When patients lost that 16% with Wegovy over 68 weeks, only 72% of that body weight was from fat. The rest of it was from lean mass. So semaglutide sort of has a unique issue with the weight loss compared to some of the other molecules like tirzepatide. But when combined with bimagrumab, not only did people lose more weight in less time, 93% of that weight loss came from body fat. So one of the interesting things to come out of ADA, and I mean, it's not even really an ADA thing. One of the interesting sort of transitions that you're seeing in the future generation of these medications is the quality of weight loss, because we're going to be able to get there with the quantity, but we don't want a lot of skinny fat people walking around. In other words, people whose body composition has changed so much that their body actually has more fat percentage on it at the end of their weight loss journey than it did in the beginning. And so preserving that muscle mass is incredibly integral to long-term health. And you see that these companies are really shifting in investing in these future pipeline medications that preserve muscle mass and improve the quality of weight loss. So bimagrumab, something that we've been following it on the pen for 3 years now, or sorry, for 2 years now. And this is the first solid data that we have that shows that this is going to be really interesting when you pair that with tirzepatide. Obviously, tirzepatide has been shown over and over to be superior from a weight loss standpoint. So when you combine it with bimagrumab, not only do you get rapid weight loss, but likely the preservation of lean muscle mass. So the better quality of weight loss. So perhaps bimagrumab plus tirzepatide for many people could be even more exciting to consider as a combination than even retatrutide. So that is really a positive one to come out of ADA data this week. I felt like I was drinking from I could say drinking from a fire hose, but it was like being under Niagara Falls with your mouth open. I mean, it was so much. And there's other things that we're not going to get to today that we will get to down the line. I do want to take a moment and pause and just thank our sponsors, Row. Row, as you know, sponsors our podcast each and every week. They're the ones that allow us to do things like take the weekend and follow ADA so that we can bring this information to you so that you can have more competent and confident conversations with your provider. Listen, if you're looking to treat your obesity with a GLP-1 or similar medications, Row has the platform to connect you with the doctors who can prescribe these medications when it's medically appropriate. Not only that, but their Row Body program, the whole program wrapped around access to GLP-1 medications, shows that patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year. And so this is amazing news for people looking to finally get control of their health. So you can check out row.co/OTP and learn more about the Row Body program. Of course, if you do get prescribed these medications, you want to know the side effects. And so there's no free lunch. You want to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting when you put these medications in your body. You can do that at row.co/OTP. Within a couple clicks, you can learn about these medications. Row is also a great company to check out if you're looking at getting back on branded medication, looking at getting a coverage, because they do thousands of prior authorizations per week, and they have perfected that process. So with compounds going away, or you're just looking at getting on the real versions of these medications now that they're a little bit more accessible from a shortage standpoint, look no further than our partners over at Row. So thank you, Row, for being such wonderful sponsors of OTP. Moving on in the news today, we've got so much more to cover. There was a really interesting piece of data that came out about Wegovy 7.2 milligrams. So we've been looking at the future of medications from Novo Nordisk, whether it be CagriSema or amycretin, but there's still room to grow with Wegovy by increasing the dose. So they dropped some data from their Step Up trial, and it's the first real look at what happens when you push semaglutide past that current 2.4 milligram ceiling. And the data is intriguing. So the numbers that you see from a weight loss perspective on the 7.2 milligram dose looks a lot like bariatric surgery. So on that dose, patients lost an average of 21% of their body weight over 72 weeks, but 33%, a staggering number, a third of the patients enrolled in the 7.2 milligram trial lost more than 25% of their body weight. So that's a third of the people shedding a quarter of their body weight without surgery, just a high dose of something that's already on the market, just a higher dose. So very interesting. Patients on this 2.4 in this study, which was again a little bit longer, 72 weeks versus 68 weeks in the select trials. We saw 7.2 milligram dose, 21% weight loss, and we saw 17.5% weight loss, which is a bit higher than we've used to seeing at the 2.4, but again, a little bit longer study with people on placebo losing around 2.4%. But this is an interesting breakdown, perhaps one of the more interesting breakdowns on this study, is that 86% of patients on the high dose of semaglutide lost at least 10%, 70% lost at least 15%, 51% lost at least 20%, and then you have that 33% that lost at least 25%. So the upper dose, the higher dose of in milligrams of semaglutide seems to be helpful, though we did cover how there is a waning effect, and they've gone in some early stage trials all the way up to 16 milligrams without a lot of separation between the 7.2. So the 7.2 looks to be what Novo Nordisk will actually apply for a label update in Europe this year, with US submissions coming shortly thereafter. Now, the interesting thing to me in all of this, kind of putting together one of the more interesting stories to come out of the week, is that with CagriSema, we know that, which is the next generation cagrilintide plus semaglutide, you're not getting much higher in the clinical trials with the CagriSema or cagrilintide and semaglutide combination than you are with high dose semaglutide. And so it's just they're in an interesting spot, because then down the line they have amycretin, which is supposed to be the next generation, which doesn't seem to be separating super meaningfully from CagriSema. So Novo Nordisk is in an interesting spot. They also abandoned a GLP-1 GIP combination recently, which is, for the future of what Novo Nordisk has to offer, really seems to lag behind some of the pipeline medications from some of these other companies, especially and obviously Eli Lilly. So interesting stuff to come out of ADA on the Novo Nordisk side. Now, I want to cover and shift to one of the interesting things that I found during this ADA 85, and that was happening kind of on the sidelines. You saw the American College of Cardiology basically say that, we've been telling people that to get their obesity and heart disease in check, they need to use lifestyle modifications as a first-line intervention, but they're no longer ignoring how beneficial the use of GLP-1 medications are. So for the first time, the ACC published clinical guidance entirely focused on the medical management of obesity, and they're urging cardiologists to use every modern tool available to lower cardiac risk. Now, in stepped this presentation at ADA on pemvidutide. So Altimmune is the company with the asset pemvidutide, and it is a GLP-1 and glucagon receptor agonist, and it has amazing potential when we're talking about heart disease and heart health. Let's get into some of the numbers that we see here. So pemvidutide phase 2 study, it was 391 adults with obesity or overweight without diabetes. This was randomized to weekly pemvidutide doses, pemvidutide doses of 1.2 milligrams, 1.8 milligrams, or 2.4 milligrams, or then placebo. And this was over 48 weeks. So over that 48-week period at the upper dose, patients lost up to 15.6% of their body weight. This seems to be kind of like right on par with Wegovy in a bit shorter of a trial, right? So at the 2.4 milligram dose, 15.6 reduction in body weight. But check out these heart numbers. Lipid improvements, total cholesterol down 15.1%. LDL cholesterol down 11.2%. Triglycerides down 34.9%. Inflammation and risk marker changes were seen as well. A decrease in remnant cholesterol, fewer small LDL particles, reductions in multiple pro-inflammatory lipid classes, and a significant drop in glyco-A, a biomarker tied to heart failure. So this kind of data, coupled with the ACC guidelines, point towards not only shrinking waistlines and smaller numbers on a scale, but real reduction in cardiovascular risk. So we're not just talking about looking better, feeling better. We're talking about living longer. And so this information from the American College of Cardiology was right on cue, because they know and they can see what's happening. Maybe a little late to the party, in my opinion, but it's good to see organizations like the American College of Cardiology and the American Diabetes Association really starting to take obesity serious as a disease. And so getting outside of the obesity community and seeing sort of these other specialties looking at obesity and saying, yeah, this is actually a disease. And if we can treat this disease appropriately, we have less diabetes, we have less heart failure, we have less kidney failure. And so you're going to continue to see this stuff proliferate, which brings me to another story that's not ADA related, but came out this past week. And I just want to cover this because I have some major concerns. And, well, let's just get into it. Before anyone was bringing you the news around what happened back at the end of May, this is back when I was feeling sick, and so I kind of flew under the radar, but nobody was reporting it. We brought you this news, this breaking news this past week on our Substack, that Empower Pharmacy, which is the pharmacy that Eli Lilly is suing over compound tirzepatide, Empower Pharmacy filed to cancel Eli Lilly's tirzepatide patent, putting basically this patent on tirzepatide on the chopping block. So this isn't a trademark lawsuit like we've seen in the past, and it's not another skirmish over labels and marketing and how whether or not organizations are using trademarks illegally. This is directly going after the patent on the molecule of tirzepatide itself. So for over a year, Lilly and Novo have relied on a simple tactic when it comes to lawfare to protect their handle on the market when it comes to their proprietary blends of peptides. So it's easy, it's faster, it's not very risky for them to go after these companies. It lets them protect their brand without having to defend the originality of their science in front of a judge, which is something that I believe that they've tried to avoid at all costs, because there's so much risk in defending their patents on the peptides in court. Because if they lose, and this gets to the bigger heart of this thing, if they lose, this is likely, based upon the data that Empower Pharmacy is presenting, likely to affect all peptides in obesity medicine. So everything that we just talked about pemvidutide, retatrutide, tirzepatide, semaglutide. These are all peptides, right? And essentially in their filing, Empower says that the science behind it was already out there, known, published, and used. They claim that the molecule is just an obvious variation of existing peptides, and that any skilled scientist in the field could have come up with this through routine synthesis. These are generally analogs to naturally occurring hormones, which these companies have found peptides that mimic those hormones, and that's what makes them effective, right? There's all this dysregulation that happens within our bodies, within our guts, where these many of these peptides are made in response to intake of nutrients, and these kind of reset the balance of something that's been wonky in our system. But if Eli Lilly loses this, the question that I would posit to you is, yes, this gives us cheap semaglutide, it gives us cheap tirzepatide. What about for those living with more nuanced and tougher to control disease? There will be no incentive for big pharma to go this very safe route of creating peptides that mimic our nutrient stimulated hormones that are increasingly improving the prospects of treating obesity, but also longevity, like we talked about with pemvidutide, like we're looking at with retatrutide. We're talking about game-changing medications. That all would come to a stop. What would be the incentive for a pharmaceutical company to innovate with peptides moving forward? So this is one that we're watching closely, and the stakes are enormous. They're just absolutely enormous, and I do worry about where this one ultimately lands. But Empower is fighting back. Lilly picked a fight with them in terms of taking them to court, suing them over compound tirzepatide, and Empower is hitting back. And so this is one that we'll be watching very closely, but it does concern me about the future development of these peptides and whether this is a short-sighted move on the part of Empower. But we will have to see where this all shakes out, where it lands. But my feeling on the surface, as I've had a couple days to digest this news since we dropped it on our Substack, is worrisome to say the least. So we'll follow this very closely. It's another reason to make sure that you like, save, share, and subscribe. Train the algorithms to tell the algorithms that this kind of content is exactly what you want to see and get. But better yet, sign up for email alerts at obesity.news. Type obesity period news into your browser and just pump your email in there. It's the best way to support what we're doing and to make sure that you get this information. We're going to have lots more to bring to you in the coming days, weeks, and months as this stuff all takes shape. But I hope you enjoyed our coverage of the ADA conference, the scientific sessions. We've got a lot more coming up, some great interviews. If you missed it, we had a wonderful interview with community member Jamie Selzler over here on the podcast this past week. Make sure you go check that out if you haven't. I think the little break we took from YouTube really suppressed our stuff. I had one video that was posted that got like 9 views. I've never, ever had that happen on YouTube. So something funny's happened over here. So train the algorithm, hit the thumbs up button, do all the things to make sure that this gets out. And if you're listening on the podcast, please don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Until next time, thank you for being the best part of what we do. I couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you. Thank you for being here. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Check out the next one.